Hi, this is Grayce Liu, General Manager for the Department of Neighbor Empowerment. Thank you for joining us tonight for our online voting webinar. And this is in regards to the 2016 Neighbor Council elections. And I just have to say that it's been an exciting journey to online voting. And if you see my Prezi, you will see that my Prezi presentation, I should say, you'll see that that's what I named this presentation because it has been quite a long journey to get to where we are now. And what I'm going to do is just give you a little history of where we've been, the request for proposal process, and what to look forward to and next steps for online voting. While we're here, you are actually, you can hear me, but I can't hear you because we're in a muted situation on this side because I'm going to give the presentation and then I'll open it up to questions afterwards. If you have a question that you want to ask and you're worried you're going to forget it, there is an icon on the top where you can join a chat and you can actually send me a question and I'll see that question. So we'll just get started for our journey to online voting. So why is it that we want online voting? Well, if you remember, the mission of the neighborhood councils and the department is to increase civic participation and make government more responsive to the local needs. And with online voting, it really can increase participation from stakeholders in the neighborhood council election process, I think exponentially, because people are able to vote in the comfort of their home, on their computer, on their smartphone or tablet, and also with online voting, there is a telephone voting component from a touch-tone telephone as well. So they have many options to vote. Instead of trying to get to one physical location on a day, usually between 2 to 6 hours, and it's kind of hard for your stakeholders to participate in that manner sometimes, particularly if there's parking issues, depending on what part of the city that you're in. And what we've seen is the results of our elections where with all the neighbor councils having elections, they averaged about 264 voters per election. And, you know, with every neighbor council having thousands of stakeholders, 20 to 95 thousands of stakeholders, and that's just residents in every neighborhood council, you know, we really want to increase the number of voters who participate. And online voting is one way to do that. So as you can see from the the Prezi presentation, the solutions for online voting really address the time issue, the access, location, the language, which is currently with the neighbor council elections, we provide only parts of the election to be translated. If they have online voting, they literally have the ability to experience the entire process of online voting in the language, not just like a Google Translate type of situation, but a full professional translation. So that's exciting in terms of providing that type of access. And also to folks with disabilities, they have the ability to vote from home with their own equipment. And again, it just provides a level of access that we've really not been able to offer before with neighbor council elections. And the other thing, too, is the complexity of the ballots for neighbor councils, with some neighbor councils having over 20 different ballot styles, citywide over 300 different ballot styles. The online voting is able to take that and make it more simple on the user end. So that's another exciting thing about neighbor council elections. And, you know, we're always striving for continuous improvement and innovation for the sustainability of the neighbor council system. And I think that online voting is definitely fits in that category. You know, for the if we want to engage the number of stakeholders in the city of Los Angeles to the extent that I think that we should, we would have, you know, hundreds or thousands of people at some point participating in neighborhood council elections, and the current system just would not allow for that in terms of the way that we allow for physical location voting. So online voting, again, would allow for that type of exponential growth that we would love to see in the neighborhood council system. So the history of this, I know some neighborhood councils feel like that there hasn't been a lot of outreach that's been done in terms of the online voting, and I definitely take responsibility for all outreach for online voting, and I want to say it's a big learning experience for me, because I feel like that we've been talking about it for so long, and as you can see, this actually goes all the way back to 2010, that by the time we got to this point, I was just telling neighborhood councils in the newsletter, at the Alliance meetings, okay, we're finally getting to the request for proposals. So so in terms of a formal, let's talk about online voting, that didn't happen in the past year, only because when you look at this history, I kind of assumed that we were all on the same page in terms of offering online voting. But now I understand that we needed to have a few more folks hear the process. So as you can see, in 2010, in spring, the city clerk conducted neighborhood council elections. Because they actually took some election polling locations from two locations to one, Silver Lake Neighborhood Council, one of the ones that was affected, they requested that it would be possible to have online voting. And at that time, we didn't have the time to do a request for proposal, so it didn't happen. So after the 2010 elections, in 2011, the winter, the Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Coalition, they did an election task force over a period of 4 meetings, and came to the conclusion that online voting was something that they would want in the future. And from there, I basically took that as my task to get done at that point. And so we've been trying to get online voting into the neighborhood council elections for the next 2 election cycles in 2012 in summer and fall. We didn't have any time to prep because we were given elections with only 6 months. So we didn't have time to do the RFP then. In 2014 spring, we partnered to do elections with the clerk, and again, we didn't have enough prep time to do that, so we actually asked neighborhood councils to try to hire the online vendors, voting vendors themselves, but it turned out that it was too expensive, too complicated for them to do it by themselves. So as soon as the 2014 elections were over, we started working on our request for proposal in the 2014 fall. And at that point, we released our request for proposals for an online voting vendor. Now, at the time that neighborhood councils, we've been talking to neighborhood councils about online voting, the feedback that, I always heard in terms of their concerns was, it has to be secure, it has to be easy to use, you still have to have that physical polling location, and there has to be voter registration in terms of making sure that those who are qualified to vote, vote, and unqualified people, obviously are weeded out. And of course, the cost of everything, which is a big concern, particularly in our budget times, current budget times. So when we went out for the online voting request for proposals, we wrote in all of these original concerns in terms of neighborhood councils, and we also were considering other things, such as the vendor's experience with online voting for elections, and I mean like actual polling elections, government elections, and not just keeping track of certain election-related items like poll workers, which some of the vendors who submitted had experience in that. The vendor has to be able to provide telephone voting. They have to be able to deal with the complex ballots. As I mentioned before, the NCs are so different and diverse, and really needed to have a vendor that understood that, it could work with that. They had to be really responsive to questions, had to have flexibility. Should we do all the neighbor councils or just a portion of the neighbor councils? And they have to have, a good reputation with their past clients. We want to know that they were able to satisfy the client's needs. So what happened with the proposal is we had 4 vendors submit, and you can see in terms of just cost where they came in, and obviously B Pro at $3.2 million was just not even in consideration. Conic, which is the Michigan company, they seem like very low priced in terms of what they came in with. But when we looked at history, experience, all the other things that we were concerned about, they were not a company that we felt could actually do the neighbor council elections. And then SOE is a Florida company, and Everyone Counts, a California company. It looks like that they may have comparable pricing. However, when we kind of look at SOE in terms of the details and assumptions in their pricing, they actually had additional costs for telephone voting that we wouldn't know of until we actually see how many people participated in telephone voting. They actually had some limits that were put in there, such as 379 voters, and they only gave us 1,500 minutes, and when they thought that each call would average about 4 minutes, when in reality, the complexity of the ballots, they could easily go from 15 to 30 minutes. So there would be additional costs even beyond what SOE quoted in their initial proposal. So when we go back and we look at, okay, what is it that we really wanted, all the neighbor council concerns and our other considerations, we decided that there was really no choice except to take Everyone Counts, and we did that happily because they satisfied pretty much everything that we were looking for at a price that we could actually afford. And you can read for yourself their experience in terms of security. They've had 2 decades of deploying secure, reliable, transparent elections in 165 countries. They do not only government voting, but also the private sector, such as Oscars, Emmys, which have incredible amounts of security tied to it, is my understanding, as I've learned since this process began, much more so than any of the government elections, apparently. So when we saw the demonstration, it was very easy to use for candidates and for voters. You would still have a physical voting location for those folks who either didn't make the online voting registration time, in time, and for those who maybe just don't understand how to use computers, there would always be a physical voting location. So the voter registration, they were able to provide basic to actually a complete voter registration back-end build-out for neighbor council elections. Now, this is something that you guys don't see, but it was really important when the city clerk and the department were evaluating these vendors. Like, could you build out this back-end portion that allowed us to verify voters and to track voters into one system? In the 2014 elections, we were using multiple Excel spreadsheets and Google Docs to track everything. It got really confusing, very easy to lose a person here and there as we were transferring some of the information around. So we really wanted one complete system, and they were able to offer various levels of that. The cost, when you consider everything that you're getting, was really reasonable in regards to the security, the expertise, the build-out costs. When we also looked at the other considerations, their experience in online voting, just last year alone, they administered 540 primary and general U.S. elections. They are able to provide telephone voting and included in some of their options. they were able to deal with the complexity of the neighborhood council ballots because last year alone, they delivered 5,000 ballot styles to voters across 27,000 precincts for 231 counties. They're really responsive during the RFP process. They're a San Diego company. They have a great team. Actually, one of them is a former neighborhood council board member, which I thought was really great. And they were able to come back and forth from San Diego, and they were very responsive. They have flexibility in terms of providing not only various options, but the ability to rent their equipment, to provide translation services if needed. And, most importantly, the people who have worked with them really loved working with them, and they made that very clear in when we spoke to some of the references. So, with that, this is the Everyone Counts proposal. So, during the RFP process, we realized that we did not sufficiently explain our voter registration back-end process in terms of how complex that could be. So their original quote, once we explained that to them, they had to go back and they said, okay, well, we need to kind of adjust some of our numbers. And so they came back with three options rather. And the first one is 85 elections with telephone voting, building out a full service voter registration back-end for $869,250. So I'll tell you right now, just in terms of time and the complexity of building that out, we will, and also cost at this point, we cannot, go with option number one. But I did ask them to put it on there so that we could see the range and the total cost of build out if we wanted to pursue that in the future. The second option, 50 elections with telephone voting, building a limited voter registration backend for $552,000. This, based on neighbor council feedback that we've had in our election town halls and via emails and alliance meetings, we're selecting this option only because this allows neighbor councils who really don't want to try online voting yet to sit out in 2016. And for those who have wanted it, not only this for 2016, but for the last few years, few election cycles, to actually have the opportunity to try it. And the third option is 85 elections with no telephone voting, building out a limited voter registration backend, same price of $552,000. Because there's no telephone voting on this, likely it wouldn't have gone through anyway, because we did want to offer that option, though from what I understand, it is pretty complex, not only to set up, but also to use, meaning it's easy to use, but you have to sit on the telephone for a long time if you have a complex ballot. So it may not be something that folks ultimately want, but we did want to, this first go-around with online voting, incorporate that so that we wouldn't be shutting out anybody. So I want to make clear that the online voting, any payment, if this is approved, for online voting is coming from unused neighborhood council funds for fiscal year 2013 to 2014. They would go into the general fund anyway, because it's from a previous fiscal year, and we would be asking City Council to move that to cover online voting costs. And anything that we don't have, we've actually put a grant in for the Mayor's Innovation Fund to cover any differences in costs, as well as other grants. And I just want to make it clear that this would be paid for, the option number 2 would be paid for out of previous year funds or grant funds, and not out of next year's neighborhood council allocation, which I heard there has been some rumors about that we would charge neighborhood councils $4,000 to $9,000 for this, and we're not going to do that. So after we released this Everyone Counts proposal in mid-February, we had some new neighborhood council concerns come up, and I wanted to address those as well. Again, there was the feedback that there was not enough neighborhood council time and consideration for online voting, and from the history, there has been some significant time invested into online voting, and and having that option available. People will still have the ability to talk about online voting once the commission approves the contract, because they will be talking about whether or not they want to participate in online voting. So there's still that time to talk about it. This contract really is about making sure that option is available for 2016, and still having neighborhood councils have the time to decide for themselves whether they want it for their neighborhood councils. No neighborhood council. One of the other critiques, no neighborhood council input during request for proposal process, that somehow we were sneaking by a contract at a special meeting for the commission. And again, we did actually have neighborhood council input. We utilized the input in terms of preparing the RFP from some time before, the years before. And the commission was provided the contract in mid-February, I believe February 12th was the date, on a special meeting. And I specifically asked at that meeting that I'm introducing this contract, but we don't have to vote on it today. In fact, I don't want you to vote on it. But in order for me to even talk about the various options and even the vendor that we're considering, I had to have it released at that special meeting. And so we've continued to talk about, the commission has continued to talk about the online voting, and we have as well in this meantime, during this time, so that we can get more feedback. So, we don't, the department and me in particular, we don't try to act in secret ways. We're always trying to find ways to collaborate with our neighborhood councils. So I do want folks to have faith in that, and the fact that we were not trying to sneak by any contract without neighborhood councils knowing this. Some other folks have said, why is it necessary to have a 3-year contract? Well, the request for proposal process is so complex that pretty much it's standard to have 3-year contracts, because people don't want to do the request for proposal project every year, because it takes months and months and months to get through. So a 3-year contract is pretty standard in the city. And then what we realized, too, while we've been doing this, is that to build out this online voting platform, it is going to take multiple years anyway. So we still do need this 3-year contract. We would never be able to get this done had we tried to do the RFP process next fiscal year when the elections actually are, because for candidate filing for the first region, that's likely going to start in November, December of 2015, and that's not too far away. That's like 7-8 months away, and so it seems like sometime it's quite, it'll come up on us really quickly. So I already addressed the charging each neighborhood councils for next year's online voting option. There's no additional expense in neighborhood council at this point or in the future for online voting. Some folks are saying it's too expensive, but if we see the ability to take, registered voter database, current registered voter database, and put it into our voters, our online voting database system for neighborhood councils, we can pre-register and preload some of these folks in there, like thousands of people, and start communicating with them now in order to get them hopefully excited about neighborhood council elections so they'll participate. This ability is, when you look at the cost, it's really minimal in terms of the number of people able to outreach and engage in the neighborhood council system. So I think we're actually getting a pretty good deal for the outreach and the expansion of the council system with this online voting platform. And some neighborhood councils also are concerned that they're being forced to use the online voting in 2016. And again, the neighborhood councils will have the choice to use online voting. If you look at our FAQs on online voting, you'll see that what we're proposing now is to take those neighborhood councils with self-affirmation and basically have them automatically have online voting. And if they want to opt out, they can do that by switching to documentation. We would also like to take a handful of neighborhood councils with documentation and have them go through to those that want to, so that we can test that aspect as well. But the goal is definitely not to have neighborhood councils who don't want to be doing this in 2016 being forced to. So neighborhood councils will have the choice to opt out of it. And then there's a concern of neighbor council takeover. And, when I ask people about this, when they tell me about it, it usually ends up not necessarily being taken over by those who aren't qualified to vote, but taken over by a different stakeholder group that they don't want to have power on the board. And, I just have to take us back to our mission again in terms of increasing civic participation and making government more responsive to local needs. Our goal is to increase stakeholder participation, and if your board is structured in a way that one stakeholder group can allegedly take over the whole board, that you should actually look at your board structure, because if that can happen with online voting, it can happen with just regular paper ballots too. So trying to keep takeovers from happening by having a limit to online voting or limit to people participating in elections is not the way to go in that case. Is to actually look at your board structure and to make adjustments there. So, your stakeholders are still your stakeholders on your board. So, moving on, how will online voting work? And basically, it's just the platform. Everything in regards to your rules still stay the same. If your voters require documentation, the voters would still have to provide that documentation to us either online or in person before they will be able to register to vote online. Self-affirmation, they would basically affirm online that they can vote, and they would be allowed to vote based on their type of stakeholder and the address that they put in. We're thinking with self-affirmation of possibly putting in, some government ID information as well, just to have a little more security in that sense. But again, Everyone Counts just provides that platform for us to store everything in one place and to allow folks to vote via computer, tablet, smartphone, at the poll, or by telephone. And they wouldn't be able to vote multiple times, and you'll see that when we get down to that bullet point. So candidates, they'll be able to file online documentation themselves, or via approved city representative with the city clerk verifying the candidates. The voters can file online either self-affirmation or documentation, or via approved city representatives who can also verify those voters. Again, I talked about the exciting potential to upload pre-existing or pre-registered voters rather, and that you can start doing now. If we're going to give you information that's probably be more along the lines of residents, but you can go to a community-based organization in your neighborhood or businesses and start registering folks to be able to vote. And our goal is to have this database so that neighbor council folks don't have to always come and bring their documentation and show us all the deeds to their house and whatnot to vote, but that they would actually already be registered just like they are for municipal, federal, state elections, and they could just, it'd be easy for them to vote so that they could participate more readily. So in regards to the voters, the approved and registered voters, they will get a secret voting code, and they can only use that once. So either they do it online, telephone, at the poll. They can actually start in one area, and if they don't complete the vote, they can finish it in another platform. So if they started it online but they never actually got to do it, and they ended up coming at the poll, then we'll be able to see that they never actually submitted their ballot, and they'll be able to finish it at the poll. And in that, the code will be registered only to that name and the address of the person. The security of online voting, I know some people are worried about it being hacked, but honestly, if you're using online banking already, or if you're using Apple Pay or anything on your PayPal on your phone or online to deal with secure information, this is pretty much like that as well, and we have the ability to look at IP addresses and see if there's a multiple number of votes coming from one IP address. We can actually go and check that IP address and see, is this a school or senior citizen home or library where we might actually be able to have a large number of people voting. So we'll be able to actually keep that more secure if we see a large number of votes coming from one location. And a side note, one cool thing about the libraries, I've already talked to our city librarian, John Zabo, about possible collaboration around online voting for neighborhood councils and using some of the computers at the various libraries around the city to collaborate in that manner and have them set aside for online voting when the time comes. So that's something that's actually pretty cool, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to partner with them in that manner. So the online voting, obviously, the platform has the ability to do surveys. So after they vote, they could get this survey. What do you think are the priorities that the neighborhood council should be looking at in the neighborhood, or any other information that you would like from your voters? You'll be able to do that. And then the neighborhood councils, again, receive their full voter database after the elections, and they can maintain communications with them, with their stakeholders after that. So Mayor Garcetti actually at a meeting with his neighborhood council budget advocates stated world-class city like Los Angeles is one that empowers its people. And I do want to say the neighborhood council system empowers Angelenos of all types and all types of stakeholders. And I want to expand that ability with online voting, and I really do think that online voting will allow us to do that. So next steps. So on March 16th, the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners is reviewing the final contract. And again, I want to emphasize that even if your neighborhood council does not want online voting, we still need a contract in place for those neighborhood councils who do want online voting to be able to finally utilize it in 2016. So, so I would say in that alone that folks should be supportive of other neighborhood councils' desires to have the ability to do online voting. If approved, it has to go to the mayor's office and the CAO for the final approval. And once we get that, we would immediately start the prep meetings to build out the back end of online platform. And we'll be meeting with city clerk, ITA, and everyone counts. And simultaneously, while we're doing that, we'd be working with neighborhood councils in the 2016 neighborhood council election town halls to discuss the implementation of online voting, and as well as any other policy changes that are needed for the 2016 elections. So part of this, actually, I didn't put this in, but another thing is because this requires funding from previous fiscal years, we actually have to go to City Council to request that money be moved. And, as we get closer to the budget being released, once the mayor releases the budget on April 20th, it's pretty much going to be jam-packed in City Council in terms of their focus. Focus be on the budget and not moving necessarily monies around in this manner. So my hope is that we could finish all the approval processes and everything, money transfers, before April 20th. So that will take some time as well. So that's the presentation, and I don't see any questions. So if you after listening to this and thinking about it, you decide, hey, you know what, I have some other questions, please feel free to email us at elections@empowerla.org and provide your questions there, and we'll answer them as soon as we see them. And then if you want to provide comments to the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, you can email commission@empowerla.org. And again, that's commission@empowerla.org, or come to their March 16th meeting and provide public comment there. Just to let you know, everyone counts will be presenting at that meeting, and I hope that we will somehow be able to live stream that presentation so that you'll be able to see just how cool they are, actually. And getting excited about the ability to do online voting in 2016. So I thank you for your time, and Again, thank you for all that you do to EmpowerLA, and have a great evening.